Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of my fall season of Essence podcast Into the Woods, where I interview folkloric and traditional witchcraft folk from all sorts of varieties. Today, I have Storm Faerywolf on. Storm, welcome so much.
Glad to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Awesome. You're very welcome. Now, I suspect most people who are listening to this podcast already know who you are, but for those who don't know who you are, a little introduction is in order. So Storm Faerywolf is a published author, experienced teacher, visionary poet, and professional warlock. And if you want to know more about that, go to Storm's website. He is a regular contributor to Modern Witch and is founding teacher of Black Rose, an online school of modern folkloric witchcraft. Written several books, actually more than several books. You've got about 8 books now coming on, including Betwixt and Between, Forbidden Mysteries of Fairy Witchcraft, and The Stars Within the Earth. His newest title, The Satyr's Kiss, Queer Men, Sex Magic, and Modern Witchcraft, is available through Llewellyn worldwide and came out here. For more information, visit his website at faerywolf.com with an A and an E, and I will place that down. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Thank you very much.
Very welcome. So, I mean, we've just talked for about an hour off camera, so I actually don't know what to talk to you about today. So we will struggle through this conversation. I guess my first question then, apart from who you are and why you're here, is you've had an illustrious career. You've been a speaker, a presenter. You've got multiple, like 8 books out right now. I guess my first question for you then is kind of where are you at right now? Like what's happening for you right now in your life?
A little bit of burnout. I'm recovering from that. Writing the books for Llewellyn were a big deal for me, and they took a lot out of me. And they also energized me. But right now I'm kind of in between projects. I've got a couple things on the back burner, that I'm thinking, oh, I need to do this. There's actually a collaborative project I'm going to do with one of my partners, Matt Oren. And so as soon as he's done with his current project, we're going to get on that. But I'm kind of blissfully in between. What am I doing now? I'm playing Assassin's Creed Origins. That's what I'm doing right now.
How are you liking it? I haven't tried it yet, but how are you liking it? I want to get into it.
So far, so good. I literally just downloaded it like 2 nights ago.
Okay.
And so I was playing Odyssey, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, which I love. But I'm at a point where I have a lot of boss battles to do, and I'm like, oh no, I just want to do the quests. So I need a super gamer boyfriend to come in and just do all the parts for me that I don't want to do. Yes, but so then I switched to Origins, so that's been fun. But I love ancient Egypt, so this is a good opportunity to kind of immerse myself in that. And I also love ancient Greece, so Odyssey was about that for me too. That really does kind of impact my whole spiritual witchy vibe, so getting to explore that through video games is like just geek nerd awesome for me.
I love it. I think that's, well, to make that serious for a sec, I think that is something that a lot of people who, when they're starting to get into witchcraft, when they're starting to do spirituality in this way, there can be a tendency to forget that we live normal lives, right? Right. And like, we need to play video games. We need to cook chili. I know you're going to be cooking chili later on, but yeah, right. So I guess maybe we can take the conversation in that way, because I don't, like I said before, I don't want to ask you all the same boring questions that you've been asked all of the other podcasts.
What? You're not going to ask me how to talk to fairies?
Well, I mean, how do you talk to fairies in Zelda? That's a good question, right?
I give them alcohol just like any of my other friends.
Who's Storm outside of being here, visionary poet, professional warlock, experienced teacher, published author? Who is Storm outside of that?
I'm a total nerd. Although I think most people in paganism are total nerds. I mean, that's basically where a lot of our nerddom goes. Just the fact that it's spirituality or religion doesn't make it any less of a fandom. it's the same as everybody. It's a tribal mentality, to some
Mhm.
degree. It's the same. It's like with straight dudes, getting together and, wearing their football jerseys, even though they've
Yeah.
never been on a football field and throwing a ball, whatever. That's kind of how I feel. I will, if I had a Starfleet uniform, I'd dress up in that at times, I'm a total geek. I'm a nerd. Um, and that's why I also love incorporating that into my magic and my craft. That's another thing that sometimes bothers people, because I've written
Mhm.
about that publicly. One of my goddesses is Wonder Woman, and I have what's basically, I didn't think of it at the time, but it's basically an altar, to Wonder
Mhm.
Woman. I have my collectibles and my autographs and everything, and but that's a place that I kind of feel like I connect with those values. That's something
Mhm.
that I actually really identified with strongly as a child. I was like, what, 4 years old
Mhm.
when the Linda Carter TV show, debuted, and that was it for me. I was sold, but I see her as a modern representation of the goddess Diana, for
Mhm.
for whom she's named. And those stories inspire. Those stories carry an egregore. There's a power that can be tapped into. But some people get really, from my perspective, bent out of shape about it because they're like, oh, well, you're not actually dealing with this ancient mythos. It's not a real God. And I'm like, do you really understand where those myths came from? Because a lot of that wasn't necessarily the religion at the time. It was entertainment. It was plays. And then it got kind of assumed into, the spirituality at some point, but the ancient people knew the difference, between the
Totally.
religion and the plays, whatever. But it's just now, and as we're trying to reconstruct things, we can't entirely reconstruct it because we don't have that cultural mindset, that they did at the time. But it's the same stuff. Comic books are just as valid as any other sort of mythic medium. The For me, the trick is, does it inspire something in you? And that's really the same with all art. you
Mhm.
know you look at art. Oh, it does nothing. Okay, well, maybe it does everything for the next person. So it
Mhm.
doesn't mean that that's bad art. That just means it's not for you. It doesn't connect with you. So you don't have to connect with comic books, whatever. But to totally dismiss it and to deride it, because you don't understand it, that's a little dangerous. And I think that it's so short-sighted, and it really just kind of exposes people's ignorance. But people get mad about it. I've
Oh,
had
we
people
do.
like
No, we do.
yell at me on Facebook about it. And I will admit, there's some part of me, I have an Aries rising, so there's some part of me that like a little bit delights on it, because I'm like, oh, if you're being a jerk about it, I'm going to like tear you down, but I'm going to do it probably in the nicest way possible. Unless it's, I don't know, political and anti-queer, then I'm not going to be so nice, but I don't know. So getting back to your question, who am I
Mm.
outside of the witchcraft and, the persona, whatever? I'm the same person,
Mhm.
persona wise, as I am at home. I don't try to build up this super groovy persona, for people to feed on, whatever. Cause I just feel like I don't have the mental capacity to keep that separate and
Yes.
to remember like what's the persona and what's me. So I'm literally just me all the time. And but the real me is, yeah, I love television, you know. I don't like reality television, so
Is it
much.
reality though? That's the thing.
I
Right?
know that's a thing. I will
Is it
admit that
reality?
for a while, maybe it was the pandemic, we did watch a couple seasons of The Circle,
Mm.
and I was into it. I want to say I was into it until the beginning. I want to say season 3, and then I was like, "What am I doing?" This is just I didn't, and it helped that I didn't like any of the people, so I was like, "Okay, whatever."
Yeah.
Um, but I don't know. I just don't. I don't watch. Oh God, I'm gonna lose my gay audience now. I don't watch RuPaul's Drag Race.
No.
Um, I don't like people being mean to each other. I'd rather
Uh,
watch the Great British Bake Off. They're so supportive.
it's wholesome. No, it's true. And
Yeah,
a lot of the drag stars on RuPaul's Drag Race come out and say like that they edit it to make it look like they're constantly bitchy all the time,
yeah.
and that's not
And
the
I get
reality
that
of the
it's
drag
it's
situation.
the ratings. It's like you want to have that drama. There needs to be conflict
Mm.
in order for the story to be driven. Whatever. But I don't know. I don't need the people fighting with each other and then like, I don't know, kind of poking everybody's buttons and I don't know. I don't know. I watched it
Mm,
early on, like probably the first season and whatever,
mhm.
and it had elements that I liked. Obviously, I love that
Yes.
queer people are being represented. I love that trans people are being represented. So that's all great. So I'm not going to ever talk against the show,
No,
but
totally.
I
Yeah.
just don't like how people treat each other. And I was more into the Boulet brothers Dragula, but even that
Mm,
started to get a little more like, kind of contestants bitching with each other, although it wasn't as much. You would think with horror and filth as a theme,
mm.
you'd be even worse, but they were actually more supportive of each other. But yeah, when it comes to push comes to shove, I'm going to watch the Great British Baking Show because they all just support each other. Nobody's cutthroat, but that's also the culture, I think, of like in Britain is a little bit more polite, perhaps. And also in the United States, you have stuff like that, and they're all competing for like $100,000. So they're all trying to
It's,
literally kill each other,
it's
behind
true.
the scenes. And
Yeah.
in like the UK, it's like they're fighting for like what, a golden plate or just the
It's
recognition.
very different. Yeah. Like if at most maybe £5,000, maybe, right? Yeah. It's,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it's not
Yeah.
like, like, oh my God, I'm going to kill people in order to make this happen. In the United States, this also kind of shows you, I don't know, I don't want to veer too much into politics, but like the whole wealth inequality over here, I get it. Like people are like, oh my God, I need that money, give me that money at all costs, this is why I'm not in support of capitalism, because it seems to override, people's basic decency, their compassion and empathy for one another just gets overridden by
I
the
agree.
dollar signs.
I mean, I think there's a linkage here to the baking community here. Just talking cultural differences there. I'm heavily looking at I'm heavily connecting with people back home. I'm moving back there next year, hopefully. And there's such a different community culture around money in particular. North America, it's really become capitalistic the way that so many shops. And I know as a former shop owner, I might be treading on thin ice here, but I feel like so many parts of the witchcraft community in the States and Canada too is so geared towards making money, becoming a big name, getting, all of like it's capitalistic. Whereas in the UK, it's you're doing the same thing that everybody else is doing. So who are you? Let's
Right.
go have a drink at the pub, right?
Yeah. No, you're certainly not on thin ice. I mean, those are, it's weird intersectionality of issues, coming together. People will often say like, oh, well, you had a shop. Now I have a shop online. I'm obviously promoting myself, my services. I charge money, for classes and for spiritual services, but that doesn't necessarily make me a capitalist. You can
No,
have
there's
money
a
and a
difference.
free market outside of capitalism. I feel like at least if we're going to keep capitalism, it needs to be neutered. We need like big regulations on it because capitalism left unchecked is just a monster.
Totally
It's
is.
just, it's never fed. It just, this undying hunger for more, 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 more money. And this is literally leading to the death of the planet, or at least our ability as a species to live upon this planet. And we really need to make some hard decisions, and some of those hard decisions are we need to give up, excuse my language, but our goddamn convenience culture. Everything has to be so convenient, at least here in the United States, everything's built on that individual freedoms and convenience. And that's led to entitlement at the expense of everybody else. This idea now that there's no such thing as like the common good, there's only the
Mm,
individual good, this Ayn Randian nonsense,
yeah.
that is just really infected our political structures like a cancer, you know. But we can obviously live in capitalism and try to make a living and not support capitalism. This weird argument like,
Absolutely.
oh, well, you are obviously capitalists because you have a store and you're charging money. I'm like, dude, I'm just trying to eat like everybody else. But I'm also trying to say, like, maybe we should do this differently, you know, you know, we should have a higher minimum wage, but we should also have a maximum wage. Yes, I
I
am a
agree.
socialist. I think socialism is a beautiful word, and I am definitely more of a socialist. If we could get like a hybrid government in here,
Mhm.
I want more social programs. Thank you very much.
Socialism
But
isn't anything to be scared of. I mean, like in Canada here, we technically a socialist country. It's nothing to be scared of, right? And it's what amazes me about the US is that they know how to tax billionaires, because look at the $1 billion lottery thing that is going on. They take half of that in taxes. I mean, come on, right?
right, it's so crazy. We could literally tax billionaires and then fund all of our social programs. We could have a universal basic income. We could have universal healthcare, universal higher education, but we don't, because we
No.
still are living under this idea that somehow the billionaires are here to protect us. And then this trickle down theory, which has been disproven so many times since the dark ages of Reaganomics, it's insane to me. But old habits die hard,
Very much so.
and it
Very
takes a
much
long
so.
time. And sometimes it takes the older generation to die off. And that sounds harsh. But I'll take it a step harsher. It can't come soon enough, as far as I'm concerned. We have way too many old white men, running the show. As for my perspective, it's mostly baby boomers forever. Not that I want to paint with a broad brush and say, oh, all baby boomers, whatever. There's plenty of baby boomers who are absolutely great people and socially progressive and all that stuff, but not most of them.
As a
And
collective group and
as a
generation,
collective,
they haven't.
they're horrible. As a collective, they're horrible, and they've made it all about them, and consistently all about them. I'm Generation X, right?
Yes.
And so I feel like we just got passed over. We're used to it. We're fine. We were latchkey kids, whatever. We're used to it. It's fine. Just give me my drink. I'll sit in the corner. Whatever. It's cool. But also, don't tell me this BS about Generation X was supposed to change things, right? And but I'm like, but I knew that we weren't going to do that, because I went to high school with these people. They were horrible people then. Plenty of anti-queer, very racist views, in that generation. So I am looking more hopefully, towards the younger generations, because they do seem to be way more accepting than the previous generations. And part of that's the internet, because people get to see, oh, look, there's people who are different than me. And even more exciting, it's, oh, look, here are people living the life that I wish that I could live. And maybe because I see them living in their light, maybe I could live in my light too. And so that, more than anything else, is the reason that I will always keep speaking up on the internet, for social issues. I know that sometimes it pisses people off. I've literally been told that I shouldn't be so political. I should just write poems. I should just write spells, whatever. But really, I think the biggest thing in the world is we really need to fight for human rights and the environment. And we need to realize that we're all on this rock together, and we need to come together. I think before we were recording, I was talking about, oh, if the aliens come, that'll probably be the one thing that actually binds us all together, because then we can collectively decide, oh, they're the ones that we can hate, whatever. And that's sad, but so far, humanity has shown that that's what we need. We need a common enemy.
Yeah.
You get like what, 8 people on a lifeboat, and they're not going to decide which direction to go. They're not going to decide, how to eat or get water, but they're all going to decide on who to hate, on that boat, and that seems to be just human nature. We kind of need a common enemy. So
it's that like old school tribalist kind of, us versus them mentality, right?
I think we're kind of hardwired for it. Yeah. And so I want us to shift that tribalism to something more global, like, oh, we're the human tribe, so maybe it doesn't have to be aliens. Maybe it could just be a really big meteor, something
could be something
in which
right?
the entire planet can come together and say, we're actually going to put aside our differences for a while, and focus on this, because there's a pressing human need. I was hoping that climate change would have been that thing, and maybe it still will, but dude, we are coming so close, so razor close to the point of no return, that it's like a nail biter.
Looking at some of the comments online from deniers, people who think that it's like Maui right now is on fire, like hundreds, well, not hundreds yet, but dozens of people have been killed because of it.
80 so far.
80 people, so close to, almost close to 100. And yet you still get people in comment sections saying, oh no, it's staged, oh, it's fake, oh, it's false. propaganda, blah
Oh
blah blah.
God. I mean, and there's no arguing with that, you know.
Yeah, no.
To argue, I can't remember who said this. One of the listeners will have to like contact me and let me know. But there's this quote, you know, that I'm probably going to butcher, you know, right now. But you know, this idea that oh, now I'm losing my ADHD. I'm losing my train of thought, even in the middle of my thought train. Never mind. I'll come back to it later and circle back.
But it's true. It's that you can't argue with people who have like cemented their point of view, because suddenly it becomes a personal threat, right? It's not
Right.
an issue. It's suddenly a personal thing. And I mean, bringing this back to you, you've experienced this in many ways throughout your career and your writing career. You've written about things that have kind of taken people aback, and people have taken very personally, even though it wasn't anything about them particularly. Can you talk a little bit about that for us, Dan?
Well, I mean, the thing, of course, that comes to mind, you know, first and foremost is, you know, I don't know if you'd call it a career, but my life in the fairy tradition of witchcraft. And, you know, for some people in fairy, not all, you know, but for some people in fairy, you know, everything they were taught was considered to be secret. And that was not how I was taught. And there was not how a lot of us were taught. And in fact, about, you know, upon hearing some of the controversies, you know, about, oh, you've revealed things that I consider secret and whatever, you know, I went and spoke to one of the founders, you know, Cora Anderson, who was very clear that there were only a few things that were actually secret, you know, in our tradition. And she listed them. And like one of them I had never even been taught, you know, whatever. It had to do with it was more like folk magic stuff. It was using the Bible, like a passage from the Bible to stop a bloody wound, you know. And I was like, oh, I wasn't taught that. Later I would learn, you know, about that, you know. But yeah, she said there were very few things that were secret. And so we asked, well, then why, you know, why was there such secrecy then around everything? And she said, oh, it was practical, because like in the 50s and 60s, you know, 40s, 50s and 60s, if you told everybody you were a witch, they were going to, you know, throw rocks through your windows. They would take your kids away, you know, so you kept it secret. But it wasn't like religious secrecy. It
Right,
was
right.
practical. It was the same reason that queer people had lived in the shadows for, you know, forever, because it
Mm,
wasn't safe, you know, until more and more people started being visible. And the same thing is true of
yeah,
witchcraft, and the same thing is true of fairy, you
totally.
know. Not that everything should be secret, you know, and not that everything should be revealed either. You know, there's certainly things that I pledged to keep secret, and
Mm,
I've never written about those things, you know, and I won't. but but yeah, but some people were very angry with me, you know, and this is before my books came out. You know, this is just me writing
mm,
on my website. There used to be a zine, you know, called Witch Eye that I was invited to write for the first issue, and so I wrote for every issue that was out there. Later, I would actually take it over as the editor and produce it, and that was a great expense on my end that never paid for itself. But then I was accused of being capitalist and just making money off
of
the
course.
tradition.
Yeah.
I'm like, I literally lost money on this project, you know, whatever. I was doing it because people wanted to share this information, and so I did that. But yeah, but then weird accusations started coming up. I got accused of plagiarism, and which never panned out because it wasn't true, you know. But they were able to argue this on websites, and there's still
Of
websites out
course.
there today that accuse me of plagiarism and whatever. And you know, when I went to write my first book for Llewellyn, which is on the fairy tradition, Betwixt and Between, you know, I was a little concerned because that's a big accusation to bring against, you know, somebody who's at least trying to make their living, you know, as a writer. And I was assured not to worry about it, you know, that they actually knew of the people, you know, that were making the accusations. I was assured that nobody really took them seriously, you know. And
Yeah.
also Llewellyn, you know, they now have access to plagiarism software, you know, so
Yep.
they put everything through, and if anything comes up, they will let you know. And there wasn't anything that came up, you know.
Mm,
So I that put my fears at ease, because I was wondering, it's like, did I accidentally like not credit somebody or whatever? And I'm going through, I'm like, I think I did, you know. Whatever I try, I'm certainly not an academic, but I did my due diligence. And but it was just, you know, this particular person, in this case it was really one person, who then got a group of people around with them. But you know, they were just disgruntled because they felt that this stuff should be secret, and they just decided that that should be secret for everybody, and that I was obviously the outlier. You know, well, because I was the one who was speaking up. I was the one. You know, most other people were like, "Oh, it's not worth it to me. I'm not going to argue with them. They're not writers. They're not putting out websites. You know, whatever." So it wasn't an issue for them. But for me, I'm like, no, I'm also, once you tell me I can't do something, I do have that Aries rising. So I'm like, I'm going to do it. And I'm going to, you know, so every time you try to silence me, I would just get louder. But, you know, and that, you know, that's intersected with some other stuff too. There's been some other accusations. I actually got accused of sexual impropriety with a student. And my accuser was never a student of mine. Right. And they actually did publicly recant their story, and the Wild Hunt picked it up. And that was, after that happened, the Wild Hunt asked me to come and write for them. So it was like, oh, okay, guess there's a silver lining. But that was like 5 days of hell, you know, for me, because it was a very detailed story. And that, I mean, I ugly cried one day. You know, I was imagine. Like, I was just gobsmacked. Like, how can this happen? And also, I have such a personal ethic about sexuality and my students, where I tell people from the get-go, I'm not going to be having sex with you, which might seem weird to, you know, some people, you know, but there is a trend, I will say, in traditional witchcraft and in some forms of Wicca, in which, you know, you would pass initiations through intercourse. And there's at least one lineage of the fairy tradition that's the only way that they pass initiations. But the founders didn't do it that way. Right. You know, I wasn't initiated, you know, with intercourse, you know, so I tell people straight up, this is not something that is even available. You know, I will teach sex magic, but all of our clothes are on, you know, and we're not doing it. You know, if you're going to do stuff like that, you do that at home. That's your homework, you know, whatever, but I'm not doing that with you. So for me to have like this hard line that I've never crossed, and then to have this story come out that was, you know, so the opposite, you know, of what was true, that was a lot, I will say. But it was only 5 days. It was 5 days, and then the person recanted. I actually spoke to them. We chatted with them on Facebook, and they apologized, you know, to me, and then they did a public apology, and then that was pretty much the end of that. But the people within Fairy who had kind of glommed onto that story they were the ones promoting it and talking, you know, behind the scenes, and, you know, spreading. And it was like over a year. I guess they were spreading these rumors over a year. I remember I had gone to PantheaCon one year, and I used to go there every year and present workshops, and our store would vend. And I was getting these weird looks from people. And I was like, what's going on? And it wasn't until like 2 years later that I realized, oh my God, that's what was going on. These rumors were out there about me for like a year plus, and I had no idea. And so people were looking at me weird. And, you know, there was another spiritual teacher in the area who's since been also, they were discredited, and they were basically a cult leader, and they moved, you know, from the area. But she was, you know, spreading these rumors about me too. And I was like, dude, we were friends once. Like, what the heck happened to you? You know, and she wasn't even in Fairy, you know. So I've certainly had, I don't know, I consider it like the secret initiation in terms of like, you know, being public, you know, being a public practitioner of the craft. You're going to attract some unsavory things, whether it's in the craft or apparently even in the houseplant world. You know, this happens as well. It's every fandom, you know.
It's true.
That was one thing that kind of it was one thing that kind of consoled me a little, because I was like, in fairy tradition, why is there so much venom and so much hatred? You know, why is this happening? I'm like, oh, that's just humans. You know, that's not, you know, unique to fairy. But I logged on to like a DC Comics chat room, and people were having these drag down fights about the validity of Catwoman, you know, and I'm like, oh my God, it's the same thing, at least. But we think it's so much more important because it's spirituality, right? But I'm like, it isn't. You know, it's not that much more important. It's the same issue. The issue is important. We've forgotten how to be kind to one another. You know,
this brings up a good question then, because I had Matt on last night. We were chatting about some of these well, kind of how I think maybe we were talking more privately about these, but how do you then like separate your practice, your focus, your interest in spirituality, your spirituality from then all the vitriol and all the drama and all of that piece? How do you refocus and then keep yourself safe from not going into that mess?
Well, I mean, that's certainly been a trial by fire, kind of learning how to navigate that. And my answer will seem very simple, but I had to come to this place. I had to go through the fire. My answer is I just don't engage it, but I wasn't able to not engage it in my 20s and 30s and 40s. Maybe towards the end of the 40s is when I started realizing, oh, okay, I don't really have to do this. And that was really with that, bigger story that I just, talked about. That kind of was the flashpoint for me. It was like so harrowing, but then I got through it. And honestly, I felt like I came through it pretty well, not only unscathed, but I got more students as a result. I tongue in cheek, I've often said whenever my haters like come out with stories against me, I should give them a fruit basket, because I always end up getting more students, and I get, people will buy more of my books and they'll order my services and our art and, whatever. So there's always like that silver lining, whatever. But now I just don't care as much because I don't really care about these people, and I did before. And that was the difference, is I cared what people thought about me, and I cared what people said about me. And not that I don't care what people think about me, but I don't have a need now to be liked, like in the way that I honestly had a need before.
That makes sense.
And I think that's also just part is getting older, kind of coming more into yourself, but I just don't pay it as much mind as I do. Although I'm going to knock on wood now, because I don't want to I still don't want to poke the hornet's nest, because it was stressful.
I am sending this episode straight to your haters, right?
There you go. Well, they're probably going to listen to it, because, there was a while, like even before I wrote for The Wild Hunt, I would be interviewed every once in a while for something random. Like there was this one article they did about polyamory, in paganism. And, at the time we were a triad, now we're a tetrad, but, and so they interviewed me. And then one of my haters shows up there in the comments and like, oh, you could have gotten somebody better than Storm Faerywolf to talk about this and blah, blah, blah. And luckily I saw other people kind of tearing that person down. They're like, obviously you have a beef with him, because nothing that he said in the article, warrants this and, whatever. And that person has now received that kind of treatment online from just random people, so that makes me feel a little, I don't know, a little grateful. Obviously, some people out there like what I do and are willing to speak up for me and, whatever. But, some of that stuff, was not only hard to go through, but like politically weird to navigate, right? Because, being accused of, again, like sexual impropriety, we have this mantra that we should believe victims, right? And I do believe that. I think that that when people come forward with their stories, we should hear them out, and we should do what we can to, corroborate them and to get evidence and whatever. But I'm not automatically going to believe anybody's story. And for me to be on the opposite end of that, right, it was very eye-opening, for me, because the people that were really promoting the idea were like, well, you have to believe victims, so we believe this victim. Well, that doesn't mean they were actually a victim, but yes, we should listen to them, and try to figure it out. And obviously these people didn't really try to figure it out. They just thought, oh, I have a smoking gun, and they did whatever they can. They thought, and I have all the screen captures, by the way. People send me everything. And I'm one of those people, I have files. I literally on my hard drive, I've got file and they're backed up. It's like, here's this person's name. I got their legal name. Here's all the screen caps. Here's the dates, whatever. And so if anything happened, whatever, I have my evidence, whatever. It just makes me feel a little safer, I guess. So I've told that to some people and like, that sounds a little crazy. I'm like, yeah, it sounds crazy until you've gone through it. And then you realize I should have kept all this, whatever. I got accused of doxing someone, once, and that didn't actually happen. What what really happened was this person who was accusing me of plagiarism was using multiple screen names, to make these accusations. And I said, oh yeah, all these screen names, it's this person, and they had used their legal name in connection with their craft, with their sexuality, all this stuff. And then suddenly people were like, oh, you've outed this person and that's against craft laws. And oh, you've also made it easy to find out that they're actually, queer and they live in the South. And now this is put their life in danger. So we're calling you now an attempted murderer. It's like, wow, this is some drama. Wow, attempted murderer. Maybe I could put that on my business card.
I
But
mean, it would go lovely with all these other epithets, right?
professional warlock
Yeah.
and attempted murder. I
Professional.
know attempted murder just makes it sound like I wasn't able to get the job done. But I was like, I don't care. I
That
don't
goes
want that.
against
I
it.
don't want that person to die, necessarily. But neither would I like. I don't know. I kind of feel like I'd be reticent to administer CPR too. I was so mad. Like, how could you possibly? But whatever.
Right. How did it change your relationship to your spirits and your gods? Going through all of that. I mean, that is a lot. I'm sitting here and I'm responding to that. That feels like a lot. How did it impact
with my spirits and my gods? I mean, I think it just made me more tight knit, with them, because I never got anything but feelings of support, from working with my spirits. And during the time when I came out with my own accusations of sexual abuse against an elder priest in Faery who has since passed away, that was a big harrowing experience, for me. But I also had some intense supportive spiritual experiences as a result, not the least of which was an intense dream I had with the late founder of our tradition, Victor Anderson, in which he came to me and actually in the dream, I won't go into all the details, but he blasted me with this energy. And in the dream, I felt like it was being initiated, by Victor. And not that I'm making that claim, oh, Victor initiated me in a dream. Yes. People have totally made that claim before, and then they just expect to be, I'm one of you, I'm initiated. Well, no, you're not. But but I had this dream, and it really just felt that Victor was supporting me from the other side. So I never questioned that I was a bad fairy in all of this. If anything, I had judgments on the community. And I really felt like the community was behaving like an alcoholic family, or like a family with an alcoholic parent. Where it's just, we're going to sweep everything under the rug. We're not going to talk about it. It's all about the optics. What will the neighbors think? And I exposed it. And so that was very uncomfortable, and then I gave a very detailed account, in which I talked about my foibles in that too. I should not have trusted this person. I had never met this person, this elder priest in Faery, but I had heard about his reputation, the good parts of his reputation, right. The bad parts, of course, came out later. And he pulled some stuff with my husband, Chaz, and I. We had gone to his house sight unseen. He was going to teach us the queer mysteries that were in danger of being lost in Faery. And this was just a smokescreen. It was just his way. He would repeatedly prey sexually on his students. Some of them thought it was awesome, and, whatever. And so they, of course, attacked me, for coming out. But enough people knew, enough people, like even like 30 years prior, had known, and so I was asked if they could repost my story to the Reclaiming International email list, which had, like, I forget at the time, it was like over 10,000 subscribers. And I said, oh, absolutely. And so they did. And that pretty much ended the teacher's teaching career. They no longer were traveling. They also, had health issues. They were HIV positive, and this was many years ago, so that we didn't have the medicines that we have now. I also suspect that maybe that interfered with his brain, that was probably, he had some related, HIV dementia, but he regularly preyed, on his students and just took no responsibility, for it at all. But me coming out with that story in 2003, that caused a big rift, in the tradition, and at least in the community, but I was kind of over it. I was like, wow, you people, you've allowed this to go on. This should have been dealt with before I even came here, and I shouldn't have to be the one to speak up and do this. Not that I was the only one, but I was the one that had the most staying power with it, because I don't know, maybe it was the Aries rising, or maybe I was just tired of being bullied. I was bullied as a kid, and I realized you have to stand up to bullies. And so I'm not going to be silent, So the only way to silence me is to kill me. And good luck. I'm pretty wily. So
it makes a lot of sense then that you would connect with Wonder Woman with that sense.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's something, like I said, I was like 4 years old when the Linda Carter show came out. And so pretty young age, that programming comes, right in there. To have like some of her values be those of truth and compassion, as well as being a warrior, I think that's a really good blend. Right. And so I'm really happy that you said that. I've not necessarily looked at it quite in that way before. I try not to do so many things that feed the ego, but that feels nice. So I appreciate that. If I could be more like Wonder Woman. What was that?
Well, it's the psychotherapist coming out. I can't help myself. It's right there, But that's the thing. I mean, like looking at your books, you're so focused on the content of your books, and yes, you speak about some of these things in your books, but I don't think anybody would necessarily know the sheer amount of all of this weight by just looking at your content. What is that like for you? Kind of then step into teacher mode, having gone through all of these pieces in your life, to go into teacher mode with students, having students come to you. What is that dichotomy like for you?
Well, I will say I'm a little, I think it makes sense. You'll have to tell me after I give you an answer if I actually answered your question. I am a little bit more cautious now. Like when I first started teaching fairy tradition, it was completely open to the public. I used to teach out of my home, and I would meet with people at a local Starbucks just to see if I got the serial killer vibe, from them, and but then they'd come here, and I have a little class with them here, and eventually then we got the shop, and I was able to do things at the shop, and whatever. So I'd have these classes people could apply for, and but after going through that for years and having although it wasn't usually my students who were causing any problems, although I've had a couple problems with actual students over the years, and whatever, that's just to be expected, humans. But I don't know, when we started what now is the Modern Witch University.com, then we started our Black Rose Witchcraft course, and that became a little bit more of a filter. So still I was open to everybody, but this was also more passive. I wasn't necessarily actively speaking with everybody, so people could sign up, and that's how the class is now. You could sign up for the class, and immediately you get your first lesson unlocked. There's 51 other lessons. They all unlock every week, whatever. It's possible for a student to get through the entire year plus, and never have spoken to me once,
Makes sense. Yeah.
And but this is a way, and then they would apply for the trance initiation at the end, kind of the graduation, and they send me a document that details all their stuff, and I read that document. I'm probably gonna outsource that soon to some of the other initiates, so whatever. But I read that and get a feel for them. But then if they want to apply to my Blue Rose Fairy training, there's an application, they have to give me a cover letter, and I do a divination. And if the divination isn't favorable, then I don't take that person now. And I didn't do that before. I just took everybody. And, I had a couple things I was like, oh yeah, I'm not qualified to teach you. Mental illness is one thing. I do ask about mental illness and if people are on medication. And I've gotten some flack for asking that question, And I'm like, no, I've been through this too many times. I've had people who were bipolar who were diagnosed, and that ended up being bad. Not always. There was somebody who was bipolar that never had a problem, whatever. So it's certainly not cut off. I'm not going to automatically reject somebody just because they're dealing with a mental illness, but I need to know what's going on. I am not a psychotherapist. I am not qualified for that. Some people need therapy, and some people can do therapy and magic together, and that can be a really good blend. Some people have no business doing magic, and I've met a few of those people, and I've actually had to fire a couple students before, because that was my impression. You actually need therapy. I am not a therapist. I can't give this to you. Go get therapy and then come back, and we'll see where we're at. And I will tell you, though, that has not ever gone over well.
No,
I try to be very kind.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I get it, but I try to be very kind. I'm not trying to judge people. We're all dealing with our own stuff. I've been pretty open about that. I probably have ADHD. This has been a brand new realization for me just this year. Like, oh yeah, I check all these boxes. I thought I was just Pisces. But so I have compassion for that, and I want the stigma against mental illness to be lifted. I think that's slowly happening as more and more people talk about it. But we also have to understand, some people's mental illness is just too severe. That witchcraft is only going to make things worse. You need to work on grounding and being in this world, and paying your bills, and eating right, and taking some exercise, and those are the things you need to work on for now. But so often people are like, oh no, my problem isn't psychological, it's not mental, it's spiritual, I have a curse. And I'm like, I've spoken to people who do have curses on them. That does happen. It happens more often than people would think. So that is real. But most people who have come to me thinking they have a curse do not have a curse.
No,
it's more of a mental illness thing. But no, I mean, there was this one woman that came into the shop once, and she was convinced that she had an alien implant. And we looked at it, and of course we're not doctors, but we looked at it and we're thinking, this is cancer. You need to go to the doctor. Oh, I've been to doctors. I don't trust medical doctors. I'm like, oh my God. These are the same people that were rallying against the vaccine, the COVID vaccine, and whatever. I'm like, I can't with the flat earthers these days. I'm sorry. Oh yeah, that quote I was trying to think of earlier, it's coming back to me now. It's like, when you're talking to somebody who has, eschewed the concept of reason, then arguing with them is basically just changing seats on the Titanic. You're just wasting your time. There is no way to rationalize with these people. It's the same thing with, like, in our country with the Trump supporters. It's a cult. There's no way to rationalize with it. So don't engage. So that's my policy now on social media. If you're saying transphobic stuff, racist stuff, pro-Trump stuff, I'm not going to argue with you. I'm just going to block you.
It's true, because who's missing out at the end? You are, right?
Yeah, that's my time and energy that I could have done something good, but now I'm just like being I'm turning into the keyboard troll. No, thank you. I don't want to do that.
Well, it's where are you investing your energy, right? If you're investing your energy trying to persuade somebody whose mindset is not persuadable, who's the insane person? That's literally the definition of insanity, right? Yeah, exactly. I think what you said a moment ago was very, very important about that piece around stigma. And I feel like, and maybe you agree with me or disagree with me, but I feel like a lot of people with kind of neurodiversity, mental illness on the spectrum, they tend to gravitate towards witchcraft and spirituality because it offers something that traditional religions don't do. But there needs to be discernment around that. The Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids in the UK, exact same thing. It was set up by psychotherapists, so they know that visualization techniques are not healthy for individuals with certain specific types of schizophrenia, because it's not healthy. People with schizophrenia or certain types of schizophrenia will be triggered by those. So
Right.
they have a mental health checklist. And if you have specific types of diagnoses, you're not able to enjoy the course. But it's a discernment thing, it's not a stigma thing.
Right. No, I agree with that. It's just, you know, and again, most of us are not psychotherapists,
Right.
and so I feel like we could do way more harm than good, by treading into that arena. The bulk of the work that I do in the craft is through leading trance, and that can be very triggering to certain people, and I've learned this leading trance in public groups. That's very tricky. And it's something that obviously I'm going to continue to do. But like I had a few years ago at PantheaCon, I was leading a workshop that I'm going to be leading next month at Temple Fest. So I'll be thinking about that when I do this. But it was an underworld journey into the fairy realm to meet a fairy ally, to work with this fairy being. And of course, I'm not talking about the diminutive fairy Victorian sprites, whatever, who grant wishes to children or some other Disneyfied nonsense. The old folklore of fairy, was like, these are dangerous, and so that is how I approach it, but not from a place of fear, but from a place of cautious respect.
Absolutely.
And I do think that working with the fairy realm is absolutely imperative, not only for witches, but for the survival of humanity as we're coming upon this climate precipice, right? Working with the fairy realm on one level is also the consciousness of nature, the hidden nature behind nature. And so I was leading this journey, and this woman started in this huge room, which was like, what, 200 people, and everyone's in their chairs in the circle in this big hotel ballroom, and I'm leading this trance. And this woman starts giving me stage instructions. I get to this point where I'm like, we've met the being now, ask them their name. And she starts pointing at me and saying, yes, ask them their name, and I'm like, what's going on, with this woman, whatever. And I'm kind of, giving her the shush finger and just kind of my hands down, like, okay, we need to be quiet, because I'm still trying to lead this trance for, 199 other people. And I forget what she said, but she starts like getting louder, and I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be a problem. I turn around, I see her, and now another participant, has gotten up from her seat and has walked over to the woman, and she's saying, you need to be quiet, you're disturbing people. So finally I'm like, oh my God, I have to do something. So I go over there and I'm like, you need to be quiet. And then she starts yelling at me saying, Kali is so upset with you. Kali is so upset with you. And I'm like, I don't even work with Kali, whatever. But whatever. I'm like, okay, I think we're done here. You have to leave. And I remember I just tried to beam like a sense of just like love and compassion at her while I was like energetically pushing her out the door, right? And thankfully, she stood up, she was holding her bag, and she walked backwards as I was walking towards her, all the way out the door. We closed the door, and I never saw her again. One of my initiates was sitting right next to her, and he knew her, and he didn't even know, he didn't hear any of it. He was so deep in trance. So he had to ask me later. He was like, what happened with this person? Whatever. And I told him, he's like, that's not possible. Because he knew her. He's like, she's fine. Like, no, she's not fine. And honestly, I'm going to tell you, she has no business practicing the craft. There's some issue, or at least right now, there's some issues going on. But that was the first time, like in a public setting, that I came up against mental illness on that level. And I thought, wow, I've been lucky, because I've literally taught this for years, whatever. And I hadn't had any real issue. There'd been a couple little things, whatever, where people disagreed with something I did. I did a trance once where we're working with what we call the divine twins. And in one form, they can come to us as a serpent and a dove. And, to kind of boil it down, it's almost like the energies of below and above. So we're bringing down this image of this dove, from up above, and we're bringing up this image of this serpent, and then we're bringing them into our bodies. So the serpent comes up through our perineum. And it was at this workshop that was fairy tradition specific. And the theme was also sex and creation, right? So we were also teaching a path of sex magic, fully clothed, mind you. But there were two lesbian women who were in my workshop, and apparently they were really triggered by it, but they didn't tell me. They told another a female organizer that they felt like it was like being raped because this serpent energy was coming up from the earth, into their body. And I was like kind of gobsmacked by that. I was like, wow, we weren't even approaching it as a sexual thing. I'm not really. And I suppose you could get that, from it. But they were kind of identifying the snake as like this phallic thing. I never said that, but based on their experiences, maybe one of them had been raped. I mean, statistically likely, I suppose, sadly to say. But that was really kind of eye-opening for me too, that like, people can take what you're doing and put a completely different context on it and then accuse you, of being this horrible person or whatever based on their weird projection, you know. Yeah. So, and there's been some other things I've certainly learned, there was another retreat that I remember I was talking about what we call the blue god, Jenny Glass. And he's like, this laughing, loving, springtime, sexy energy. Right. And as I'm leading this trance, I'm talking about like the newness and the wonder. And and I referred to tapping into that energy of like your first kiss, right? And for me, my first kiss was this beautiful, exciting thing. And then I heard from afterwards from one of the female participants that, well, they knew what I was trying to get at, but their first feeling with that was negative because their first kiss was forced upon them by a family member. And I never had occurred to me, so some of this stuff is good because you learn,
Yes.
and so, I would have more to say, about that. If I was going to talk about your first kiss, I would give that some more qualifiers, I think, next time. So I'm glad for some of that when people are actually willing to talk about, oh, here is my trigger, but they're not doing it in an accusatory way.
It's about that
I'm much more
sharing
likely to
piece,
be
right?
able to hear it. Yeah. But even with the one that kind of accused me of, kind of triggering their rape stuff, I can understand. I have compassion for that. And yeah, I can certainly do better. Certainly don't think it was my fault. I didn't
Right.
do anything wrong, but I'm still willing to take that and learn from it and try to present things, better because I don't know what
Mhm.
everyone's triggers are. Um, and again, I'm not a therapist. And
That's the
and I
thing,
think
right?
that
Yeah,
some
yeah.
people really show you that like they really need to have done their therapy first, and so you can't go if you're not going to do your therapy, then you can't go around blaming everybody else for triggering you. You need to learn how to manage your triggers.
That
So
is one of my soapboxes that I stand on regularly, that whole idea of shadow work, because shadow work is such a big psychological part of spiritual work. And when you actually look at like sitting in the world that I do too, like the type of shadow work that often shows up in spiritual spaces is transcending, not really focusing on the issue,
yeah.
right? And oftentimes that's a way that you manipulating people is through that idea of shadow work. Oh, we're going to trigger this for you, and then you have to deal with all of what's coming up for you. And then people find themselves unprepared for actually dealing with somebody who is dealing with complex trauma coming up in front of them
Right.
without then taking on manipulative.
Yeah, I think a lot of people in the craft when they talk about shadow work, um, honestly, I hope I'm not going to offend anybody, but I probably will. Um, it seems to be in practice, it's more like play acting a lot of times. Not always, certainly. I try to be very conscious of that because shadow work, I think it's integral to the
It's wonderful.
magical
It's
practice.
powerful. Yeah.
Oops, I just knocked everything over. Yeah, I think that it's absolutely imperative that we engage in shadow work, but not just as a performative, ooky spooky, sort of thing, which a lot of people do, because witchcraft on the surface can make you feel empowered, but then only to a certain point, right? It brings us to the edge of that abyss, but then it has to be our decision to jump in, or or at least to look into that abyss and see what might be there. That's where the witch gets their power. You know, we confront our fears, and some of those fears are big, right? And if we have, and that's just a normal person who's had like a good upbringing and no major traumas. But what if you've had major complicated traumas in your life? Chances are your high priest or high priestess is not qualified, you know, to take you through that. You're going to need a therapeutic journey as well, or maybe for a time instead of, you know. There's definitely been times I've had to tell people, no, go and get therapy and then come back, you know, and we'll see. And none of those people have come back, by the way, and that's fine for me. I do hope that they get the help that they need.
That's the
In
hope,
some
right?
cases,
Yeah.
it seemed very severe. In some cases, it was obviously very severe, and they were able to like kind of conceal that earlier on because we weren't dealing with shadow stuff. But when we really got to the, you know, the precipice of that, it was like, okay, I can't deny this anymore. And yeah, you have to go for your own safety and also for my safety and the safety of my community.
That's the thing, right?
You
That's
know?
what the personal ethics piece. And I've been part of the pagan community now, witchcraft community, about 20 years now, right? And only really in the past 5 or 6, 7 years have I really stepped in to actually engage. And I'm noticing that there's been a shift, at least from the pandemic, that people are now, writers are now taking this a lot more seriously, this idea of ethics, this idea of scope. And yet, at the same time, there are also people out there, like there's a very, very popular individual in the ATRs who literally said on a TikTok once that if a spiritual worker tells you to go and get therapy, run, because they've not done their spiritual work. And it's like, dude, are you really saying that to your people? Are you really? And that's that manipulative piece, right? Comes back to that capitalism piece, right?
I mean, personally, you didn't do the message any service by revealing that it was on TikTok. I have to say, nobody should take anything on TikTok seriously. These are the people that were hexing the moon. You know, so
right. Yeah, so we're shouting at the fairies,
know,
right?
yeah, I'm like, oh my, that is not going to end well. Let me just tell you. Yeah, I don't know. We have to take, I don't know, the stuff on TikTok we have to take with a sea of salt. The only thing I do on TikTok is I follow comedians. I mean, I follow my friends just because I want their engagements to be up, you know, whatever. But I'm not there to get witchy information.
Yes.
I'm there because I want comedians and I want cute dog tricks. You know, that's what TikTok is good for. If you're getting your witch information from TikTok, let me tell you something. You know, that is not a good idea. You're not getting some good information. Not that there's not good people. There's obviously good witches on TikTok who are giving good information, but the vast majority, it's like that thing of like,
I agree.
You know, everybody's allowed to join. So that's what you get. You get everybody. And let me tell you, there's a huge spectrum of idiocy, you know, that happens on you know, social media because everybody can join, right?
Totally.
You know, there's no peer review, you know, whatever. That's what I want.
Yeah.
I want witches peer review. That's what I want. I want a group, you know, and a little bit we have, you know, I feel I'm very fortunate to be a writer for the Wild Hunt, you know, and you know, I feel like they do their due diligence. I know not everybody's always happy, you know, with everything that the Wild Hunt does, but you know, nobody's 100% happy with any news service.
This is
You
the
know,
thing,
whatever,
right?
and they have, you know, limited parameters. You know, they're journalists. I'm not a journalist. I'm a columnist. I get to talk about my opinion. You know, so I have it easy. You know, but the journalists have a hard job. You know, and I respect that. But I'm really proud to be a part of that. You know, I've been writing now for them for I think I just had my 4th anniversary, so 4 years. I think with the Wild Hunt.
It's only been 4 years, really.
I think it's only been, maybe it's been 5. I have to, again, me and linear time. I'll have to go back on my notes and see, but it's been a few years at least, and yeah, I'm happy to be a part of that because there really isn't anything else like it, you know, for pagans and witches, right? But but yeah, I don't know. But if you're, so Wild Hunt, you can get information from the Wild Hunt. That's peer reviewed in the sense that there's a bunch of behind the scenes editors, and
Mm.
we're all sharing major news
Mhm.
stories, and we're talking about it and trying to parse it out. And there's plenty of times people say, "Oh, can we do a story on this?" And the editors
Mm.
will say, "Well, no, because we don't have enough information," and or
Right.
whatever. We don't want to just fuel this internet fire, because sometimes it's just
That makes sense.
accusations against groups. The witch wars never ended.
Oh, never
They
end, no.
just,
Mm.
yeah, they'll never end, because humans, right? Humans love like getting into their little tribes and chucking
It's
sticks and
true.
stones at each other. It's a
Well,
little
I
sad.
noticed that it doesn't matter what segment of the community you look at. I mean, in the traditional witchcraft community, there's, big issues between Cochrane's craft folk and other forms of
Right.
that, and it's just, it goes on and on and on. I am noticing, though, maybe it's just people I'm associating with, but I am noticing a swing back to actually people wanting in-person working with groups
Yeah.
of people again, right? And I think that's a healthy way of approaching,
Yeah, I agree.
you
I
know?
think now that
Yeah.
I want to say we're on the other side of the pandemic, because it's still
It's
a
still
thing.
there. Yeah.
People, COVID keeps spiking in places, or whatever. Thankfully, most of us have gotten vaccines, and so it's not going to be as, bad. But if you haven't gotten COVID and you haven't gotten a vaccine, please go and get a vaccine. I've had COVID twice. The first time I had it was before the vaccines were available. It was actually before they were even saying COVID. It was at the end of 2019, and our whole coven got it, and we were sick for
Oh,
months, like off and on,
yes.
and I still have some lingering effects, from that, from long COVID. But then we got vaccinated, and then, or I guess vaccinated would be the right word, and then I did get it again, but it still was not fun, but it
No,
was less severe than the first time I got it. So definitely, if people are still debating about vaccines, please get vaccinated.
I really hope
This
people aren't, but yeah.
this anti well, it's something weird too, because I think in a lot of witchcraft, not that it's all left wing, because there's
Mhm.
definitely right wing craziness, that has infected, paganism in the craft. And I say infected because I am certainly not in support of anything on the right. um, but the left has just as many problems, they just manifest
Agreed.
differently. And that's really where I saw the anti-vaxxers first. For years, the anti-vaxxers had been at pagan events. I went to a local pagan event several years ago, and there was somebody who got up on the stage and was, you know ranting against vaccines, and I'm like,
Mm,
what is going on with our species? And
oh.
now leprosy is back in Florida. We had a measles outbreak. These are things that, were gone, but
And
now
now they're
there's
coming
all this
back. Yeah,
distress. They're coming back again, Oh my God, people, what is up?
it is ridiculous. Storm, I apologize. I just have to pause for a sec, okay? Okay, we are back. Sorry about that, Storm. So, yes, the whole conspirituality thing is not something that I totally get. I try to wrap my head around it, but it's just a very strange thing we're sitting in.
Yeah, I don't know. I
Yeah,
mean, part of that is obviously, I think, the internet, has, it's a double-edged sword, right?
it's a double-edged
There's a
sword,
lot that's
yes.
really good about the internet. I teach pretty much now exclusively through the internet. You know, I don't remember the last time I had a person actually in my house for a class. Even though I set up this room, I don't know if we're actually doing video today, but if you are, you can see my
We
temple
are.
room.
It's a
This is
beautiful room. We
Oh,
are.
thank you. And during the pandemic, we redid this room specifically because I thought, okay, well, as soon as things open up again, I'm going to start teaching things here at the house, and obviously that hasn't happened. So I use Zoom, I use Discord, to make the connections. I teach Reiki, online. I do long distance attunements.
Mm,
But I'm still having people like we are now. I can see you, we're talking, we're in the
mhm.
same like mental space, and now we're going to make that a spiritual space, and so that works. But I'm pretty fortunate. I before the pandemic, I was already moving in that direction. Most of my students were online because I can only really physically serve a community here in the San Francisco Bay Area. But so many of the people who were interested in fairy tradition weren't here. You know, they were all over the country, they were all over the world. And I also didn't feel like it was fair to just tell these people, okay, well, sucks to be you. You can't come to the San Francisco Bay Area, you know. And then, but I also, before I started teaching long distance, I didn't necessarily think it could be done, you know. And the reason it happened is I was invited to take part in a teleconference ritual, and it was led by fairy initiate and author Francesca de Grandis. And I will admit that I agreed to it, but I kind of felt like it was a little bit of a joke. And I thought, oh, ha ha ha, what a lark. I'm going to do this teleconference ritual, you know. And but I didn't say that because I wasn't a complete jerk, you know, apparently just on the inside. And so then we did the ritual, we started, and I was amazed, like from the get-go, when the person started casting the circle, I felt that energy.
Right.
As if it was in my room. And then by the end of the ritual, I realized this isn't actually that different. Like the energy was still there because our consciousness was attuned, you know, in the right way, in the same way that it would be if you were in the same room together. Now, there's certain things that make it easier if you're in the same room because you can see everybody, you can see where they're moving. If you know the script, you know the ritual, you know, oh, they're picking up the knife, they're going to do this now and focusing on this. But if you already know all the steps and you're being verbally prompted, you know, you can get to that same space. And so that's when I started experimenting with teaching online. And then even to the point where I experimented with doing a ritual online of dedication, and in which I actually got some of my initiates who had been through the dedication in person. I had them do it with me online. And then I solicited their feedback, and the feedback was all the same. It was like, yeah, I felt it just like I did before, you know. And so then I made the decision I can do these things online, and that caused an uproar in fairy tradition. You know, people were like, you can't teach online, you can't teach long distance. I'm like, oh, that's really interesting, because in the one conversation, a phone conversation that I had with Fairy's founder, Victor Anderson, he offered to train me over long distance. You know, so I knew that that was a thing. He trained people long distance apparently all the time. Back then, and I never did it, but he said that we could do this by me recording questions on a cassette tape and then mailing it to him. And then he would record his answers and mail it back to me. Now, I was too clueless back then. I didn't even know what to ask. So that was not going to work for me. But the fact that he offered that, you know, and then I realized, oh, other people have done this too, but they were just more quiet. But I was the one who was like more public about it, you know. And then so people are like, this is impossible, you can't do it. I'm like, no, what you're telling me is you haven't figured out how to do it.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it.
But it absolutely can happen, you know. And so we're all living proof. Most of my I mean, I only initiate in person. You know, I've made that commitment. So if you're, you know, you could get through all the training, it could be years and years and years, but if you can't fly out to see me, well, then we're not going to do the initiation. I'm not going to do that online, but everything up to it, I can do.
Is that part of the showing of the sacrifice or the dedication or is there an element, like an energetic element in that for that reason?
I do think so. Yes, for me, I can't answer for everybody, but for me, yes. You know, I feel like if this is really something that you have a passion for and you're committed to do, you're going to find a way to either come see me or maybe to fly me out to your area. I'm willing to do that, but that's probably more expensive because now you got to put me up and feed me, you know, whatever. Thing, right? and if you come to see me, I'm going to feed you. You know, that's just how that goes. You know, that's basic hospitality. You know, but you know, there's been some talk about maybe arranging like workshops. You know, maybe so that people could crowdsource the fee. You know, for for like the airfare fee or you know whatever. So I'm willing to work with people, but I can't do it at a financial deficit. You know, I'm literally making my living from writing and teaching, and so anybody who thinks that I'm living high off the hog, oh my god, they just haven't met the hog. Don't make I don't know. Yeah. We do not make a lot of money. You know, yeah. When I have the shop, when I had the
Sorry, go on.
shop, it was, I could see more people thinking that, like, oh, he owns a shop, he owns his house, whatever. I'm like, you don't understand how little money is left over at the end. The operating expenses were huge,
Yeah.
huge. We were paying $9,000 a month for our
Oh, I can
storefront.
imagine. Yeah. And that was in San Francisco, right?
It was in Walnut Creek, which is
Oh,
like a
Walnut
suburb
Creek.
of
Okay.
San Francisco,
Yeah.
basically.
So,
And it was also kind of an upscale town. They have a Tiffany's, they have a Neiman Marcus,
um,
whatever. And so we were a little away from that, but
mhm.
still, it has a reputation for, if you want to spend money, you're going to go to Walnut Creek. And it was nice for a while, but it just expensive. And there was always something breaking. There was always there was personnel issues, all that kind of stuff. And it was, but then there were people, some of
Yeah.
my detractors were like, he has 500 students and they charge this amount a month. I'm like, where did you get that I have 500 students? I literally had, like, I think 15 students at the time. I'm
It's
like,
incredible what
what?
people project onto you, though, right?
Yeah, it's
It
hilarious. I
really
mean, it's
is.
hilarious
Yeah.
now. At the
Yeah.
time, it was crazy making,
Oh,
and
I can
and I
imagine.
would be
Yeah.
angry, whatever. And now when I hear those things, which isn't as often, but when
Mhm.
I hear those things now, I just have to laugh because I'm like, wow, I know somebody out there is making money, but it's not me.
Yes.
Not that I'm not, necessarily poor. I
Mhm.
count my blessings every day. I have a big,
Mhm.
beautiful house in the San Francisco Bay Area. I own my car. I have been self-employed since, what, 2004, whatever. I'm fine. Could I do better? Yeah, I'd like some actual non-working vacations. That would be lovely.
Yes.
But that's something to work up to, right? But I'm doing okay. Um,
That's the trouble I find. People, and I'm starting to get that with kind of, I'm a month away from my book coming out, and like I'm already starting to get little comments like that from people.
Congratulations.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah,
I
that's
didn't put that in
weird.
there just to put my own stuff in there, but like it is weird what people project, right? Like I literally had somebody send me a screenshot saying that somebody wouldn't buy my book because they thought that I had enough, and it's like, what? I mean, it's
Okay.
again, whatever, right? But like, because I'm a psychotherapist up here, they're like, oh, it's a psychotherapist, he's making a lot of money. Like,
I can't imagine that's true, but
no, it isn't. Actually, it's
yeah.
not. I live
Yeah,
with my
I
parents right now.
oh my goodness. Yeah, I have other friends who are also psychotherapists, and they're doing okay, but it's not,
Mhm.
nobody's getting rich off of this. It's
No,
like,
no.
it's not like you're a psychotherapist to the stars.
One day,
Whatever,
maybe one day,
there you go.
one
Then
day.
then you'll be making that money, you know.
I'm waiting for Oprah to get onto it, to come and find me. That's what I'm
Yeah, she
looking
needs to come
for.
back, right? She needs to come back. I guess she's still around, like, but in her heyday though, that kind of kept the alternative spirituality movement alive,
I can
really.
imagine. Yeah,
Her
I can
book club
imagine.
and everything, and yeah, and then she went away, and there was just a vacuum. Nobody else was doing any of that, and so all of that interest really started to wane. And we're like, even where we were at, it was like,
Hmm.
oh wow, we see a difference now that there's no more Oprah book club. But is it back now? I don't know. She's doing stuff, but it's obviously not the same as when she had her show.
Yeah. It's I don't I mean I think the Red Table Talk thing with Jada Pinkett Smith kind of took away a lot of stuff from Oprah too. I think there was something going on there too. I don't know. I don't pay attention at all anymore. I don't have enough time for it.
I hear you totally. There's too much
I
going
don't
on.
have enough time.
I don't have enough time. I can't even figure out what I'm doing. I can't keep track of other people too.
Well, you have to make chili at some point today. That's what you're doing.
That's true. Yeah, we gotta do grocery
Yes.
shopping, making some chili. So
Mhm. On that note, I think I'm satisfied. This has been a good chat, Storm. I was a little nervous. I mean, I
yeah.
had Storm Faerywolf coming onto my show, but
Oh my
I was a little
goodness,
nervous.
whatever. Oh, ugh,
You know,
gross. But
this was good.
no, 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 never. Don't ever feel that way. That's silly. I thought that always blows me away too. People are like, oh, I'm fangirling out, or whatever. I'm like,
Mm,
why? I don't have any reason why. There
this
shouldn't
is
be
the
any reason why
thing.
for that. Uh,
It's that
big
perception
deal.
thing. It's that projection thing. I mean, I remember seeing your stuff when I was a young gay. I like coming out in mid 2000s, and I'm trying to think. It was you. was you and a couple of other people around that time. Eddie
Eddie
was
Gutierrez.
right,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
we were good friends.
I he's well missed. He's missed. I didn't
Yeah,
know him at
totally.
all. I didn't really get to know him, but I know plenty of people who were I've worked for him or were connected with him, and he was big. Like pagan spirituality and gay pagan spirituality back then. There was only so many voices.
Right. I
Right?
mean, Christopher Penczak, of course, he
Christopher
wrote
Penczak, yeah.
Gay Witchcraft, and that's actually how I met him. Was when he
Mm.
was writing Gay Witchcraft, he wrote me to ask if he could include my website, faerywolf.com, in his resources, because
Mm.
at the time I guess I was one of the only queer witches to be talking publicly, on
Yeah,
that
there weren't that
level.
many. Yeah.
And that's, you know, that's weird to think about, because I
Mm-hmm.
didn't go into it thinking I'm going to be the first. I don't know if I was the first. I don't think I couldn't possibly be the first, but I was probably out there enough because I was talking to a lot of people. I was always at the keyboard. I worked from home.
Mm-hmm.
I could be doing answering these questions all the time. And then I got my website. My website started in 99. So
Wow.
Google loves it, right? Because it's been around forever, and whatever.
Back
It's
in
had a
the
few
Alta
different
Vista days, right?
incarnations. Oh my God, totally. Right. Yeah. Yeah. My first version of the website, I don't remember what it was. I think it was like ValueNet or something. I don't even remember what it was. But yeah, 99. So I've been out there from the early days of the internet. I feel like Grandpa Witch now. Like, oh, in the 1900s,
Yes, in the
you know.
1900s. Well, there weren't. I mean, thinking back, like my introduction to any form of alternative spirituality was like Starhawk. That was really my introduction to it, and it was around the same time, Solitary Wicker book was around, but I never read it. That wasn't my introduction. But it was
Ah,
really through like the god. It's weirdly, I know a lot of people that was their introduction, right? But for me, it was Starhawk, and so goddess
yeah.
spirituality was really my approach. And there wasn't really a space for gay men in that particular. It
Right.
was
Yeah.
welcoming,
God, one
but
of my the earliest book I can think of, besides like there used to be these Time Life books on the paranormal,
right.
and there was like one on witches, kind of sandwiched in between like ghosts and UFOs. Um, but the first book I think I ever read on the craft was A Witch's Bible Complete by Janet and Stuart Farrar. And that wasn't exactly gay welcoming. And it wasn't exactly sex positive either. What I took away from it was that there was a lot of kind of sweeping sexuality under the rug. They talk about the great rite, and mostly it's done symbolically with the chalice and the blade. But if it is done in actual, the high priest and the high priestess will go into the other room while the coven waits, or if they're in the same room, the coven will turn their backs while they're in, high priestess and high priest are in the circle, doing the deed. And I just thought, I don't know, that just seems like, I think they doth protest too much. It just seemed like here's a weird cover up, because even at that early age, because I would have been like 13, 14, right? I knew that like sexuality was powerful, that there was a carnal element at the core, that the foundation of the craft. And I can't tell you how I knew that. It was just something I knew. And so reading that, I was like, this is really a PR, campaign, to try to
Mm-hmm.
make people accepting of witches, whatever. And I
It's
do think, if I'm not mistaken, I do think they've kind of said since then that, yeah, a lot of what they wrote then was kind of more,
think so, yeah.
to be, accessible by the public. And so they couldn't say everything that they wanted to say. But there were some stuff, definitely, Gardnerian and Alexandrian have definite like gender roles. And that's something that I actually rally the hell against in the craft. I think that gender roles in the craft do all of us a disservice.
I agree.
And that's something that I'm really proud about in fairy tradition. There are 0 gender roles in the fairy tradition. And anybody can work with a god, a goddess, a non-gendered deity, all of it. That's not something that we even bat an eyelash, in fairy. So I'm really happy to be part of that. But I don't know. I think that if you're working in a form of the craft that has strict gender roles, you're also not doing yourself any favors, and I think that people need to really question that and revise that stuff, because it's damaging, you know,
Agree. And
it's
I think that pendulum swinging, like the vast majority of people I had on in the summer, I think out of 18 of them, there were 16 of them were all queer, and all have spoken about that. The vast majority of people I'm having on right now in the fall season, all queer, all traditional folkloric practitioners. It feels like there's a vast movement towards that. But even in the past 10 years, I mean, Minoan Brotherhood was around, and we'll
Mhm.
tie this in with your book, right? Satyr's Kiss. You explore all of this history. Minoan Brotherhood was around, but it's quite low key now. Cult of Antinous has grown.
Mhm.
Some of the other queer specific traditions have grown. Even Caldera's group has grown, right? There seems to be a swing towards that, but people are finding and redefining things for themselves, which I find interesting. So here's a question
Yeah.
for you with your book. What was it like for you to sit down and write Satyr's, which is an expose? I mean, it's really focused on this history and this movement and seeing from the queer male perspective what spiritual like, what did you notice while writing this, being in the community for so long?
Well, one of the things that really drove me to write it was I felt that there weren't a lot of viable resources, especially not on a practical level. You
Mm-hmm.
know, the very few things and there's some good stuff out there. Don't get me wrong. But there wasn't anything that was really practical. That was like, here's how a queer craft might look and how it might differ, from what you've seen, as the craft. What I mostly saw, and I never do this, but I'm going to do this. I'm actually going to talk about a book I hate,
Okay.
and I
Okay.
never do this. So, but there's a book called the Gay Wicca Book, and I'm not even going to say the author's name because I don't want to shame them, whatever. But I will say it is a terrible, terrible book. Basically, the whole premise was, here's Gardnerian style
Um,
witchcraft with the occasional message that gay people can do this too. And that was basically it. There was nothing of import. There was nothing
right.
that was actually specific exploring queer identities, queer deities, any of that. It was still using this heterosexist paradigm in order to view, the universe. I had already written, stuff on my website, that kind of, flew in the face of polarity, gender polarity magic, which anybody who's followed my career is I have no love for gender polarity. Um, Obviously, if that works for you, especially if you're heterosexual, then it's awesome. I'm not saying you need to abandon it, but having this chokehold on the idea that it's the only thing that works, and if you're not doing it, you're somehow not actually magical, or you're not really a witch, or
Mm.
it's just absurd. So that was something that really kind of fueled me, was I wanted to give something that was an alternative to this gender polarity. And I know that that's lessening now. It's not as bad as it was when I first came in to the craft, literally going to a pagan festival and having them like insert a woman between the two men, because you have to be lined up male
Mm.
female for the
Right.
magic to work. I'm like, my magical partner is a guy. I'm gay, whatever. This is how it works. That is my nature, whatever. So that was a big draw, but drive, for me to write this book, but also the sex magic thing, because I feel like so often, you know, when sex would be talked about as a positive in the craft, it was always tied to fertility. And so therefore it was this, what I identify as a heterosexist paradigm, this idea that it has to be male and female. Even when we decide, oh, well, we're not talking about that in terms of like our sexual relationships, but we're talking about the energies, male energy and female energy. We have to balance that within. No, my view is there's no such thing as female energy. There's no such thing as male energy. There is energy and how that might present through our bodies and through our gender identity. But that doesn't mean that that's always what it is. It's amorphous, it's nebulous, it's energy, which is also, I think we use the word energy more as a euphemism for, we probably should say consciousness. But whatever, that's a whole other discussion.
Mm.
But I wanted to show that, hey, gay sex can be just as holy, and it doesn't have to not be as hot either. We can have hot gay sex that's also hot and spiritual at the same
Yes.
time, right? And I also don't want to get into that game of like, oh, only like this particular type of sex, is
Ah, good, good,
spiritual,
good. Yeah, 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 yeah.
no. And if you're only focusing on the spiritual, the transcendent, well, then you're missing out. It has to, I preach in my teaching is embodied transcendence, right? We do want that ecstatic transcendent experience, but we need to have that grounded in the body for it to be of any
Absolutely.
use to us. And we need to also reinforce this idea that we are holy just as we are. Just as we are. I don't need to balance my male and female energies. I just have balanced energy. That's what I'm working on. And if you want to call it male, you want to call it female, that's your own thing. you know I identify as a man. I'm a cisgendered man. I'm just probably a different type of man than the boomers would like. And that's fine. I figure if I'm pissing off the boomers, then I'm doing something right.
There you
So
go, right? Yeah.
those were all things that wove into me wanting to do the book. Some of the things that were, because whenever I write a book, I learn a lot, right? Because you do a lot of research and
Absolutely.
then you're kind of embodying this. And one of the things that my first draft didn't have, and then I realized, oh my God, I need to go back there and add that, was a little bit on drag,
Oh, yes.
because so, and I was like, oh my God, how did I miss this? This big part of queer culture, which I also recognize is a spiritual and shamanic activity.
Very much so.
This playing with gender, whether it's through inversion or through something else, just this weirdness that often is part of drag as well. It's not men pretending to be women. It's using gender play as a window into the possible, right? And what can you bring out? For me, this is the drag represents the goddess, and this is how gay men in particular have embodied the goddess for a long, long time. And we can go back to, I don't know, the ancient Greeks and before, and a lot of the what we would consider to be gay men now. Obviously, we didn't have that identity, back then, but we would consider them gay men today. Often they would ritually castrate themselves and present as women, but they wouldn't just wear women's clothing. They would often have a combination of men's and women's and sacred regalia.
Mm.
So it was something other. This is more like a third gender, if you will,
Yes.
where they bring in that sacred regalia to represent they're not just fully human. They are beyond human. They are also part of the gods. And so we did have a special space, and some of my biggest inspirations were Randy P. Connor and his partner, David Sparks. Randy wrote a lot of books, but the Castle's Encyclopedia of Queer Myth, Symbol, and Spirit is a
Love that.
staple.
Love it.
Everyone should get hold of it. It's really,
You know
really
the
awesome.
irony with that? It's like $400, $500 on Amazon.
Yeah, well, the good news is we're keeping our fingers crossed. There is a revised edition that's coming out.
Oh,
Yeah.
excellent. Okay.
Randy died just recently, like within the last year and a half. And again, I'm not good with time, but I had actually spoken with him on a few occasions, and he had been following my work for years. I was very flattered to learn that. And I've since, after he died, I've spoken to David a couple times. But they had been working on this revised edition, and it's basically, I guess, maybe twice as big as the original.
Excellent. Oh, that's exciting. I mean, if I'm
Yeah,
going to take
so
anything away from this whole conversation with you, that's most exciting bit.
that's so exciting. I
Yeah,
know.
that's
I'm
so
so,
good.
and on a personal
Yeah.
level, I'm excited because I apparently I get mentioned in it.
Oh,
And so I
there
was
you
like,
go.
wow, I've made it to the big time, right? That was yeah, I wasn't expecting that at
That's
all. So
awesome.
I
Yeah,
so I do have a little bit,
that's
invested in making
validation,
that
right?
making
Yeah.
that come out. So hopefully they get their publisher. I think they were in between publishers. All the queers listening, send good vibes to make that happen. We need that revised edition of that encyclopedia to come out. But but I had followed their work, and it was so important because it really showed that, you know, the homophobia that we deal with as commonplace today and has been sold to us as a common condition from the
As a
get-go,
norm,
you know,
yes.
as just has always been this way. No, it has not always been this way.
No,
And this Western concept of only two genders is not how it's always been. There are plenty of cultures that recognized multiple genders and still
absolutely.
recognize multiple
And still
genders.
are, yes. Yeah,
Exactly. It's
yeah.
Western civilization that is backwards, you know. So another good book, Queer Magic by my friend Tomas Prower. You know,
Mhm.
that's another one that I would recommend because it really shows the colonial aspects of
Absolutely.
promoting homophobia, you know, as a Christian ideal. And even when the colonialists leave, you know, the shadow of that is long reaching, you know, like
Very
we've
much
got,
so.
you
Very
know,
much.
stuff, you know, Africa is like all messed up with homophobia, India, you know, there's so many
Mhm.
places where they weren't before. There was a
No,
place for
they
queer
were those
people.
places.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
This is where
I
white people come
remember
in and mess everything up.
well, and this is the thing, tying it to your book. I mean, you talk about um, queer archetypes, the gay male archetypes, and I loved that section in particularly because you know the roles that have evolved within the Western gay male community, the twink, the bear, the
Yeah.
you know the drag mother, all of those, right? When you look at those, and then you look at, say, Thomas's book, or you look at the Castle Dictionary, you start to see then that those roles in this community now mirror those ancient roles in other.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm
It's
glad you brought that
interesting.
up.
Hmm.
That's because that's one of the pieces that I would see criticized about the book.
Interesting.
And
Hmm.
so some people thought that by me bringing in like just queer history
Hmm.
and looking at queer archetypes, I even talked about stereotypes, but
Right.
how they're rooted, you know, they're usually rooted in something real, you know, and here's how we can, you know, work with that. Some people were offended that I included,
Hmm.
you know, these things like the twink and the
Hmm.
bear and whatever, oh, and top and bottom and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not saying those things as a means to pigeonhole people, but as a means to just look at what's happening in the culture. That has been part of the culture for a long time, for good or for
Very much
ill.
so.
But usually it's for good. But you know, yeah, people can misuse labels, you know, whatever. When we stop thinking of top and bottom as something that you're doing and instead as something that you are, that might be problematic because you're more than a top, you're more than a bottom, you know,
Absolutely.
whatever.
You're more
You're a
than that.
human
Yeah.
being, but that's something we can focus on. You know, it is a trait that, you know, people have brought up for a long time, you know, in the queer
Hmm.
community. Everybody knows what a twink is, everybody knows what a bear is, what an otter is. You know, you might roll your eyes at the language and maybe we could come up with something better later, less animalistic or whatever that suits your fancy, you know, but you know what that is. You know,
Yes.
the language is being effective here, it's conveying an idea. And so I wanted to include those things because that's part of queer culture, a queer culture that is born from threads of many different cultures, right? And so, but we do have a kind of this, dare I say, a rainbow thread, you know, that moves through all of this, that kind of binds us all together. You know, there's a lot of drag, you know, happening in the queer
Yeah.
community, you know. And while we're at it, let's talk about things like sex clubs, you know, and you know, and group sex. And
Bathhouses and all
you
those.
know, absolutely, that's been a big part of queer identity, queer history. It doesn't mean you have to like it, it doesn't mean you ever have to go to one, but to pretend like it doesn't exist is a disservice to our history. And then of course I brought in just regular, I'll say quote unquote regular queer folk, right, who weren't witches, you know. But I think in a queer craft, we should remember the figures in queer history, like Alan Turing.
Totally.
You know, he
Yes.
obviously wasn't a witch, but he was a big person, not only in queerness, but for the whole world. You know, he helped win World War II, and how he was treated afterwards was just abominable, right? To me, Oscar Wilde is one of our greatest queer saints. You know, Matthew Shepard is a queer martyr. These are people that remind us of our history and our place within that history. And I think that a queer craft must embrace queer history in order for it to be effective. Now, I gave examples on how people could do ritual. I gave examples on how people could do sex magic. I give a lot of practical sex magic exercises for individuals, for couples, and for groups, because I thought that's really important to try to represent everybody as much as I can, as much as I'm able.
Right,
I'm
this is the
obviously not
thing,
able
right?
to represent everybody. I can't represent trans people, but I wanted it to be open, to trans men. If you're identifying as a man, hey, hopefully some of this will be useful. Whatever's not useful for you, then just chuck that in the bin. You don't have to
Mhm.
pay attention to that. But my hope was not to create an absolute system, that people
Right.
needed to follow, but to inspire people to create their own system that speaks to their fullness as a queer practitioner of the craft. I think I was successful in that. I
I've
feel
of
really
the
proud of the
reviews I've
book.
seen, yeah. Oh, I absolutely should feel proud about the book.
Thank
I
you.
mean, we're on many of the same pagan, gay male pagan groups. I'm seeing on those groups, I'm seeing on Discord, I'm seeing on social media, right? The same questions often being asked, especially from people, not so much the younger crowd, who very very used to it, like the early 20s and teenagers, right? They're used to having their own way of looking, coming to these. But for people who are in their 30s, for people who are in their 40s, the gay males who have been in heterosexual relationships for however many years and are finding this sexuality and this spirituality and coming to these identities. How does it look? What that's still that idea, that colonialist perspective, needing permission to be. I
Yeah.
think that what you've accomplished, and I mean, I think by now I've had the vast majority of authors who have put out books on queer men. There's a couple that, and like Thomas is still missing, but I've spoken to majority of them. I had Ariana Serpentine on a couple of months ago,
Oh, yeah.
and all of them are saying the same thing. There wasn't enough books out there. And what do people do in the pagan community? We look to books. Give me a
Yeah.
book. Is there a book on this, right? You know, it's fascinating that from a cultural perspective anyway. So I honestly, I loved it. I knew that I would love it because you were covering all the topics that needed to be said. But I think that also those reminding of those groups that have been there for a long time. No One Brotherhood, Cult of Antinuous. I think Jeff Cullen was mentioned there too, at the Sabbatic Witchcraft crowd. Even to have those mentioned just as a visibility of, okay, well, there are possibilities now. Think about what does it, how can this fit for you? I think that's a really powerful approach, Storm, honestly.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, and of course I was kind of, I don't know, walking that tightrope, about like giving enough of a structure, because I also know that like some people need a structure. They need practical exercises, they need a ritual to show them like, oh, this is possible. And if you want to use the exercises and the rituals I give just as is, then absolutely, that's fine. It'll give you a complete system, or at least as complete as I felt like I wanted to give. You know, um, I kind of envision the Sabbats a little bit, through that as well. But mostly, I'm focusing on like the idea of the grand Sabbat, and then I even kind of liken that to, hey, like go into a queer club, especially for your first time. That was like a big queer witches Sabbat for me. Going to this place kind of in between the worlds, and you get to be who you really are, and then you come back and join corporate society once more, and kind of
Right.
keep to yourself.
It is
But
quite
yeah,
a going into the underworld, isn't it? It's going to a queer club or a gay club for the first. Like going
I
into
mean,
the
it certainly
underworld and
was
coming
for
back out.
me. My the first time, I'm almost embarrassed to say, but the first time I went to a gay bar, I was 17, right? And so I was too young to be there. And but of course you're able to get in. And but it was so weird for me because I'd never been in a space that was just all queer people.
Yeah.
Other than just like a few of my friends, hanging out in my room, or whatever, or like going to the Rocky Horror Picture Show, which I was in a cast of that for a few years, and so then, and it wasn't all queer people, but there was enough. And so going to this bar, it was like, oh wow, it was an initiation. I had an older friend who, I think he was 21, so he wasn't that much older, but still, and he was kind of the leader of the group, and he was taking us on this journey. And we went to the White Horse in Oakland, California, which is one of the gay bars here in the United States that claims to be the oldest, longest running gay
Oh,
bar.
wow.
There's a few that kind of have that claim to fame. It was possible it was actually operating during Prohibition,
Oh, there you go. Okay.
so there's that. But it was, going in the, and it was all, at the time it was all run down. I've been there since, and it was all, it was very nice. But at that time it was run down. It was very seedy, so it did have that underworld feel. It was very dark, inside, but it was like magical, right? Because there's all these people, different people. There was drag queens, and there was, there were butch lesbians, and there were, femme guys, and there's leather daddies, and what, it was just like this amalgamation of all these different queer characters, and I felt more at home than I had ever felt. I felt safe, and exhilarated at the same time. And to me, that was like a Sabbath experience. It was, I get to be with my people and join in this revelry. I got to go dancing, whatever. And so later, when I was writing The Satyr's Kiss, that really came back to me, and I was like, this is the queer Sabbath, or at least it's a manifestation, of the queer Sabbath. Your mileage may vary. That could also be going to a bathhouse. That could be going to a drag show. Something, especially your first time. Being out in this queer only space. Where you get to learn stuff, but also celebrate. I think that both of those are so important. So I wanted to include that, in the values anyway of the book. And yeah, I do feel like
I loved it.
Mission accomplished. So yay.
Yeah.
Thank
I
you very
loved
much.
it. It was a beautiful book.
Thank you.
And again, I think it speaks to that need for community again. Again, that pendulum swinging, not just in the witchcraft community, but like, like, I mean, apps have done a number on the community for us.
Yeah, I mean, they've really
And,
taken the place of
yeah.
these communal spaces, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's a double-edged sword, because most of the communal spaces were bars, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's tricky, right? Because it's really centered around something that is a trigger for a lot of people. There's a lot of alcoholism in the queer community. There's a lot of drug abuse in the queer community. And clubs like that really kind of, it enables that to happen a little bit more. I'm not saying that bars are bad, whatever. People should be able to go and enjoy them and whatever. But I'm like, I'd like more queer coffee shops, right? Not that I'm drinking coffee these days, but still, you know what I mean? Or queer book, I love like queer bookstores, places that can be community hubs that maybe aren't surrounded, or don't surround themselves around, alcohol and, potentially, drug abuse, whatever. I think that's really important. So books are a nice thing, but we do need to have those physical spaces. But the apps have really kind of taken away, from a lot of those, even the bars and whatever, because it's like, oh, it's so easy. I can just, find a hookup, whatever, and then be on with my day. And then you're not really connecting with people, but it's like any tool. It's like any tool, I think Grindr or Scruff, they can be a tool used for positive. I have a profile on Scruff in which I tell people I'm not meeting up. This is not what I'm doing. I'm here to talk about witchcraft and sex magic. And some people do, they want to talk about that. And I just feel that's why I'm there, whatever. I mean, don't get me wrong, I used to hook up, whatever. I'm just not in that space right now, but I'm there to kind of provide an alternative. If you want to talk about these things, I'm happy to talk about them, and to give people an opportunity to, obviously it's promotion too. It's like, hey, buy my book,
Yes.
Whatever.
Yes.
But I've had a few people tell me, oh yeah, thank you for letting me know this existed, and I bought your book and I loved it, or, whatever. And, or just happy to have a chat with people about, hey, how queer sex can be spiritual too. It's not like it's only spiritual for the straights, whatever.
No, that's the thing. Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people are asking that question. It's because there is so much around, especially in the goddess movement or the kind of just general new age spirituality. The body is sick. Well, how does that work with somebody who has body dysmorphia? How does that work with somebody who doesn't feel comfortable having, missionary heterosexual, right? All of those pieces. But that question gets asked a lot on that group, sex magic, sex magic, sex.
Yeah.
And I think really what they're asking. Sorry, go on.
No. I didn't mean to cut you off. I was going to say also the idea of asexuality, I think is important to broach as well, because so often those people get excluded. We say, oh, LGBTQ plus, right? And I can't remember beyond that. Honestly, I've tried.
Okay.
That's why I use queer, because to me, queer is an umbrella, that takes all of these people, within. And I'm not saying that to erase the individual identities, but that is just to give us something poetic and quick, but asexual people exist, bisexual people exist, this is not something that needs to be or should be erased. But especially with the asexuality thing, there's a lot of prejudice, against that, which just is so weird to me, because I'm like, especially if you're prejudiced against certain sexual expressions, you would think then an asexual would be just your delight, that you'd be like, oh, you're not doing any of the things that I'm mad about, whatever. And yet they're extra mad about that because, they're not having, any sexual attachment or attraction, or at least not enough, I suppose, by their standards, so I just don't get that. But I certainly want to be mindful of that as well, even though I'm writing about sex magic, but I also gave versions of spells that did not involve sex. I called them a red rite versus a blue rite. The red rite being sexually active, the blue rite being more either symbolic or just not engaging on that level at all. And so, because I wanted asexual men to also feel included, in this as well. And hopefully that has come through. That I'm less sure about. I haven't really heard that from people, but I've heard things from trans people. I've heard things from women. Women apparently are getting things out of the Satyrs Kiss. That wasn't my intended audience. But I'm really happy that that's true, because ultimately I just want people to get something useful, out of my work, and to start conversations and get people talking about these things. That to me is a success. And so who knows, I don't exactly know yet, how well the book is doing, because, it takes a couple of years to figure that out, but it feels like it's doing well. I feel like I paid off my advance. And so, whatever that feels like, it's probably doing well. But that people are talking about it and asking me questions about it, that to me is the hallmark of success, because that's really what I wanted to happen. I wanted people to actually work with and engage the material, right? And obviously it's not for everybody. I don't know if you've read any of the reviews. There's this one choice review, a 1-star review on Amazon, that's saying, oh, how disrespectful the book is, and how it's just bringing in sex clubs, and and how this would be better suited for a sex club than a witch's circle. And one of the things that they had said was that they had never, in all their years in the craft, have they ever heard of a sex toy being used as a divine tool. And I was like, how can you have gone as many years as you claim to have gone and not had that? I've been in non-queer spaces in the craft that literally here's the big stone phallus on the altar.
The wand, right? The phallus of the wand. What is,
Yeah, if you read enough about that, they're like, oh yeah, a pine cone at the tip of the wand. It's specifically a phallic thing. They'll talk about the athame being a phallic thing, the chalice being this vaginal symbol, whatever. And I mean, I don't necessarily get in with all of that. I'm like, it's a knife and a cup. Thank you very much. Just like the moon is not female, it's a rock, right? But they were very angry. But what that tells me is that there is a need for this work. That there's still, even in the queer community, the queer witchcraft community, there's still a lot of sex negative attitudes that are very pervasive. And a lot of that comes from being shamed by heterosexual people. right? And, it's still pretty new. I mean, how long have we had marriage rights here in the United States? It's really not that long. I've been with my husband now 30 years. And we have been legally married since what is 2008, 2009.
2008, 2009, yeah. It's
And
only
just because
14
that's
years.
when it was available. If it was legally available 30 years ago, we would have done it then, but it wasn't, and so this is still really new. There's still a lot of people with this old programming. And growing up in an oppressive society, we do take on the attitudes of the oppressors to some degree, unless we consciously examine that, right? We're back to talking about shadow work.
Right.
And so that was something too with this, is that I want to see more queer people doing shadow work around their sexuality. But part of that is
It's
also
needed.
shining a light onto that, and then recognizing, hey, this is holy, and I'm going to champion this as something holy. It's not something that I need to be ashamed of. It's something that I can be quite proud of, because I'm the way the goddess made me, right? I was born this way. Thank you, Lady Gaga.
Well, that's the thing, right? Thank you, Lady Gaga. Yeah, this is it's interesting. I'm sitting here listening to what you're saying. I totally agree. I'm reflecting on what I see in my work, because I put myself as a spiritual psychotherapist, so a lot of my work is like transpersonal Jungian narrative, right? But because I walk in a lot of the witchcraft, so a lot of my clients tend to be within those alternative spiritual spaces, and they tend to be queer, right? And it's interesting, the dynamics. I think it's a generational thing. The kids, like under 25, I hate to use that word kids, but they are kids. I'm 36, they're kids. They're so nihilistic with their bodies. It's like the pendulum is swung completely the opposite way. It's like they abuse their bodies in a way as a way of showing power over, and as a way of like, I can do whatever I want with my body because fuck you, Whereas the older people, it's like it's that Puritan mentality, right? For my body, I don't have access to my body because society is going to hurt me. Either way, it's coming from that place of hurt. So it's interesting, kind of. I would be curious to see how different generations of queer people are up, because I'm noticing, sorry, go on.
No, I was gonna say, but we're seeing how the pendulum has already swung in both directions, because as you're saying that, I'm like, oh, that reminds me of the 1970s and the punk rock movement. When that was why you put safety pins through your nose. It wasn't necessarily a fashion statement. It was a political statement. It was an FU, to the powers that be. They were saying, no, I'm claiming my body. I'm going to do whatever. I'm going to tattoos. Maybe people would, cut themselves as a protest. Obviously I don't want to tread too much on that. There's a serious issue with people, cutting, self-harm. But there was also kind of that political thing too, where it's just like a little bit shock value, but it was because we felt this oppression and we're told we have to be a certain way with our body and only this way. Well, I'm going to do this outrageous thing. And it's a way of claiming power. It's a way of establishing your own autonomy and your sovereignty, and it's not, something that I want to do. I'm squeamish. I'm never going to do self-harm, but I've done piercings and stuff and whatever. And that's in the 90s. That was really big. That's when I got my nose pierced. Right. And in the 1900s, kids. And,
century.
but it's all, I know, it's so last century. Oh my God. But so I've seen that pendulum kind of go, in different ways. And it's not just left and right. It's like that pendulum's going all over the place, right? Exactly. And but now at 52, I have a little bit more perspective, because I've been able to see these, more cultural trends. And yeah, I don't know. So, but definitely I think the issues that keep coming up are obviously individual rights, the sovereignty, the ability to be sovereign in our own bodies. This is so important. This is so important. And especially important for women and those who were assigned female at birth, because we're seeing laws now that are stripping that power away. In a very real sense. I was reading this meme that was pointing out that in a real way, in some places in the United States, a corpse has more bodily autonomy than a living woman.
Interesting. And that makes sense. Yeah.
Because in order to donate your organs, you have to say, I'm going to donate my organs. But if you don't say that and you're dead, well, they can't take your organs. But they can deny a woman an abortion. They can force her to, have this pregnancy, so that is scary,
Mm-hmm.
and, I mean, they're coming for women right now. They've been coming for queers for a long time. This is not something that they're just going to give up. They have to be stopped. And this really, it takes all of us speaking up, and it's not just one, there's not just one answer. There's not just one way to address this. We need healers, but we also need activists, and everything in between. And so my book is just one humble offering, towards that, to maybe help getting people talking about it. I want queer people to feel empowered spiritually in their queer identity, and not that they have to hide that or they're spiritual in spite of their queerness. I want to say, no, we're spiritual as an affirmation of our queerness. And
Mm.
that should be the center of our being. And so I want to encourage queer people to at least consider abandoning the gender roles, abandon the gender identities, what you feel like are forced upon you, and just be you, and recognize that your craft is about you. You don't have to adhere to somebody else's ritual structure in order to be valued or to be magical. If they can't see you for the fabulous witchy being that you are, then they're not your coven.
I think that's a good place to wrap up. I think that encapsulates what we've talked about today, right?
Right on. Well, thank you
Storm, this
so
has been
much.
amazing. Storm, this has been amazing. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. Yeah, we've been chatting on for a long time. It doesn't feel
Yeah.
like it to me because, I guess Gemini moon, but yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. This was a great conversation. And so, yeah, thank you
I'm
very
looking
much.
forward to sharing this with people. I really am. How can people get in touch with you, and what do you have coming up in the next, say, 6 months that you're excited about?
Let's see. So you can always get in touch with me through my website, faerywolf.com. That's Faery, wolf.com. Just remember there's no fear in fairy. So, but you can also get in touch with our projects by going to modernwitchuniversity.com. Also go to modernwitch.com. From there, you can sign up for our Patreon. We have a lot of different offerings that we do every month. And we also have a store, daturatrading.com, in which we sell our art, signed copies of all of our books. I'm talking about what we call House Forlocks. That's myself, my husband, Chaz Bogan, and my partners, Devin Hunter and Matt Oren. Together, we offer all of our stuff through the web. In terms of projects coming up, I'm kind of in between projects, but I do have some back burner things. I'm working on some stuff for I don't want to give away too much, but kind of a
Yeah, of course.
self-care, magical grooming for queer men is something that I'm kind of
Mm.
working on. I do have an energy work for witches that I'm going to be working on with Matt. In fact, we're going to be teaching that next month in the Salem, Massachusetts area. We're going to be both teaching at Temple Fest. I don't know when this is coming out, but
It'll
yeah,
be
next
after
month.
that, but yeah.
It'll be after that. Oh well, so you missed it. Sucks to be you. But yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. Kind of putting my toe back in the water of public teaching again. Hopefully there'll be more, after that. But yeah, couple things will be coming up. There's some more classes we're going to be adding, to the university soon. So definitely check that out. But yeah,
That's
thank
exciting.
you.
I will put all of those links down below. I'll have Devin on at some point in the future too. Matt I've already had on, and we've spoken about their work too. And I think Matt mentioned a couple of those. I will make sure that those are all down below. And do check out Storm's social media. And for everybody who's watching this, thank you so much for coming. And Storm, thank you again.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much. It's been awesome.